Hi, and welcome to the Mayor's Report. My name is Dan DeMaina. I'm the media manager. Joining us, as always, is Mayor Joseph Curtatone. Mayor, thanks for joining us.
Dan, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. We are out here on the shores of the Mystic River here at Baxter Park in Assembly Square, and we are taping this episode on September 2nd, and it's the 1-year anniversary of the ribbon cutting of the Assembly Square Orange Line station. A year ago today, cut the ribbon and took the first ride on the Orange Line from Assembly. Mayor, can you just talk about the growth in Assembly Square that you've seen over the course of the past year? A year ago, the station opened, but a lot of the businesses weren't opened up yet. Now we have office tenants, a lot of restaurants have opened up, stores. Tell me about the growth that you've seen in the square since the ribbon cutting.
Well, since the train station, I can't believe it's been a year, has opened up, we've seen the first 4 buildings here, two of them being mixed-use residential, one a mixed-use entertainment center where the theater is, and right behind me, the mixed-use office building, now fully occupied. And the tenancies in the residential units are pretty much fully occupied, but almost 500, just short of 500 units, residential units, over 300,000 square feet of commercial space and retail, and 100,000 square foot office building filled with technology companies like SmartBear. And we've seen the groundbreaking and actually the elevation and building of the Partners building, which is over 800,000 square feet of new development as well, and the groundbreaking of the next residential tower on Block 6, which will be 440 units, residential units, including ground floor commercial retail. So what the T station did is what we predicted it would do. It would uncap the full potential of the Assembly Square district, and it's happening.
Mm-hmm. Talk a little bit about the Partners building. You can see it down at the end of the road going up over there, about the jobs that's going to bring to the square and what that means for the square as an employment center, and as an employment center, and also what it means to bring in that daytime population to the square and into Somerville in general.
Well, Partners Healthcare, by consolidating almost 16 locations from around the region here to Assembly, does a couple things. For them, it saves them more than $15 million per year in operational cost, and that's important in terms of improving the product and services of one of the most important employers in the Commonwealth. But for Somerville and this location, it just emphasizes of how great of an office, research and development, technology location Assembly is. And people have taken notice. Partners will bring with it 4,750 employees working here in the daytime who will shop, eat at the restaurants, contributing to our local tax base and the vibrancy of this great neighborhood. And below that will be about 110,000 square feet of more commercial development, where you have more retail, entertainment, lifestyle, restaurants. So a continuation of the great vibe you feel in this neighborhood today, right across the district.
And the next steps, we see the Partners building going up now. The next steps are going to be blocks 5 and 6, which is, it sounds like some residences are going to be in there as well, a hotel and some more additional ground floor retail residential uses.
Right, so in block 6, which if you come down today to Assembly, you see it fenced off. They're doing the site work. That will be a residential tower of about 440 units, more than 240 feet high. The ground floor will have the same type of commercial retail activity you see in the other blocks. Fronting that more towards the mall in the other block, which will break ground later this fall, will be a luxury boutique hotel. A Marriott Autograph is the brand, high-end boutique hotel of approximately 200 rooms, and in addition, more than 110 for-sale condominium units. And again, ground floor, same type of commercial and retail activity. So the vibrancy of the square continues. And in addition, there's room and capacity to build another 250 to 300,000 square feet or more research, development, and office on those 2 blocks. And then between that and Partners are blocks 7 and 8 with an additional several 100,000 square feet of development, which is planned for and will come.
Mm-hmm. Now, Assembly Row is about 60 acres. But the total district down here, the revitalization district that was so designated, is there's another 70 plus acres that could be done, right? So I know the city has been looking at the master plan for the entire district again, kind of turning the eye towards Circuit City. There's the marketplace. There's a whole host of land here. What does the city kind of envision for this is much longer term, but in the much longer term for the square and in the remaining area of the district?
So we are You're right. The entire Assembly Square district is approximately 146 acres. And we are now beginning to master plan the remaining part of the district. So you have the row, which are the first 4 blocks all the way to the partner site. Then on the other side of Grand Union Boulevard is the old mall, the old theater site, and where the Home Depot in Circuit City and other properties along the periphery, either at the far easterly end of the site or on the other side of Middlesex Ave. As a community, we want a master plan. We want to set the narrative and expectations of what we want to see developed there, the amount of job-creating industry, the amount of housing, the job. We want to meet our jobs goals and our goals in summer vision. And by creating that narrative, in addition to the value we've created here in the district with the infrastructure improvements we've made, we'll set the stage for further intense development to Assembly Square, which will result in, I believe, construction and development for the next 20 years.
Mm-hmm. So we're looking now at sitting in the middle of a model of large, dense, mixed-use, transit-oriented development in Somerville. That kind of segues into the next subject, which would be the Green Line extension. As we learned just recently, bids came in and they estimated that the projected cost of the project could be anywhere to $700 million to about $1 billion more than what they were initially projecting. Tell me about your reaction when you heard that news and what the next steps are, what you've been doing in terms of talking with the governor's office and talking with MassDOT.
So the new number of the projected increase in cost for the future, or the next phase of the construction, was certainly surprising. And we want to understand that number. What people should take comfort is that the Green Line is under construction today, as we speak. There is no delay. There's more than $330 million of contracts being executed on the ground today. There's $200 million of steel on its way, and there's $1 billion from the federal government sitting on the table.
Great job.
Thank you. Yeah. And thank you. Terry. And you know, people have some anxiety, but we are working together with Governor Baker, his administration, Secretary Pollack, Frank DePaula. We support their approach. We want to be practical and prudent. We all want to understand why such a significantly higher increase in cost. Now, direct costs on these types of infrastructure and construction projects around the country are escalating. We are, despite the conduct of the Dow Jones, we're still at a very high economic status today, so access to labor, goods, services is at a premium cost. But the indirect costs certainly seem to be out of whack, as they say. Mm-hmm. And we want to understand that. So together, we agree with the approach of looking at the scope of the project, you know, looking at valuing engineering pieces of the project. That means that at the stations, do they need to be so elaborate? Can we value engineer them down, make them accessible, efficient, operational? And if it's in an area where there's a prospective intense development, a new master developer may come in or development team and contribute to elevating the standard of that station. We want to look at different infrastructure financing tools that the state has available so that we can use the growth that is captured, new jobs, new taxes to pay for some of the infrastructure. The Commonwealth is going to press hard and push hard against the contractor and the contractor's bid to make sure that's the best price that we're getting. And we're also going to examine the procurement practices. Was the mechanism used to put the project out to bid the best way to get the best competition, the most competitive bids for the taxpayers? I think when we put all these things together, and we're working together as problem solvers, the city, the Commonwealth, and all stakeholders involved, we're going to trim that number down significantly, and because we want to build the best Green Line project for the entire Commonwealth, and it's going to happen.
So when we talk about rescoping the project and value engineering, we're talking about things like, you know, maybe a station doesn't need to be as elaborate as initially thought of, but could that also include lopping off stations, or would that put the project at risk if for instance, said, okay, we're just not going to do College Ave right as part of this?
You can't take stations off the project. The Commonwealth of Massachusetts received a $1 billion grant from the federal government, from the Federal Transportation Administration, because they saw the value in this project, as the governor does and as we do, and it speaks to why this is the most important transportation project in generations and for the Commonwealth today, because it creates 18 million square feet of new development. It creates 30,000 net new jobs. It adds $5.5 billion into the Massachusetts economy. It adds $2.5 billion to the commercial tax revenue to the tax revenue and the coffers of the Commonwealth. And it adds so much environmental equity to the region, a region that has suffered for generations with higher rates of heart disease and respiratory illness because all our transit stations were taken away generations ago and we were stuck with I-93 and an expanded Route 28. So for the positive environmental impacts for one of the most congested regions of the country and all the economic benefits, the governor supports this project, as he has stated. The secretary supports this project, as she has stated. We obviously want it, and the federal government does. But we have a collective responsibility to work together to make sure that we're spending our tax dollars wisely. So we'll try to, and work hard, and we will, bring down the amount of liability moving forward in terms of what we have to pay, and making sure we're delivering all these benefits to the entire Commonwealth in a very prudent way.
Are there any similarities between the Green Line extension and the Assembly Square station? If I recall correctly, the Assembly Square station had some funding lined up, and then the Great Recession hit, kind of put the project at risk. What were some of the ways that the city worked with the state and with the developer to keep the Assembly Square station, which is now open, on track?
So when the recession hit between 2008 and 2010, projects like Assembly Square were either being scrapped or put on hold. And we didn't want to do that. We worked together with the Commonwealth, partners in the federal government, and the developer and the community to ask ourselves, how do we move forward? Together, we invested $133 million of taxpayer money. The city contributed $25 million through a creative financing tool called DIF, District Improvement Finance, and where we took the new property tax revenue of 3 of these buildings that wouldn't exist unless the infrastructure is in place, took that new revenue, reinvested it back into the district to pay for the bonds to build the roadways, the water and soil utilities. The Commonwealth used a similar tool, the Infrastructure Incentive Investment Tool, which it took the new commercial tax revenue and income tax revenue from the jobs and businesses that will be located here or that open here that wouldn't exist unless we built the infrastructure and the buildings are built, and reinvested that into building, again, the roadway and hard infrastructure and the T-station. The private developer contributed $15 million to building the T-station. And so collectively, it is a model of a public-private partnership. And we also leveraged $13 million, actually more, $13 million in ARA or stimulus funding from the federal government. We were able to get it done together and bring to the Commonwealth the best and most important development project on the Eastern Seaboard. On the first phases alone, we'll deliver 22,000 net new jobs for the city and for the Commonwealth. And we leveraged $1.5 billion into the Massachusetts economy and hundreds of millions of dollars in new tax revenue for the Commonwealth. It was a win for everyone.
So there's obviously the risk. You want to be respectful of the taxpayers' dollars. You don't want to just go in and do something at any cost, which I think is what Governor Baker said. So there's obviously the risk in going forward with a project without trying to mitigate some of the costs. But can you talk about what the potential risk, if there is any, in delaying the project further? What if you wait another 2 years and then try to get up? Is there a risk that costs would rise? Would it put the federal funding at risk at all?
It's both. It would put the federal funding at risk. We have certain timelines to meet certain air quality standards along the corridor of Cambridge, Somerville, and Medford as a result of the big dig, and which resulted in the requirement to build the Green Line extension. So you put the federal fully funded grant agreement from the federal government in jeopardy, $1 billion. So this is about respecting the taxpayer's dollar while we're building the best transit project in generations. So we want to respect the money we spend today, which is hundreds of millions of dollars spent today to get where we are, which we would lose and get no benefit to the economy, no jobs, no new tax revenue, no environmental benefit if we didn't move forward. We want to respect all the opportunities of the taxpayer dollars, again, all the benefits to the environment in the economy. And again, you can't just whittle off any 1 or 2 stops. Though the grant agreement from the federal government is conditioned upon the Green Line project being built as submitted, which is all the way to College Avenue and Tufts and Union Square, along with all the pieces of it, the scope of it, and must be delivered within a certain timeline to meet environmental standards and requirements.
And you've mentioned a couple of times the higher rates of heart disease and respiratory illness. When Somerville was in the 60s treated as a cut through for cars to get to Boston. Let's build 93 through it. Let's build McGrath Highway through it. And then there was even the inner belt, which ended up getting scuttled in the face of opposition from residents. And now there is a cafe study which is being done by a number of groups that are looking at how particles near highways and people living in the shadow of highways, how that affects that health. Can you tell me a little bit about that? Because you grew up here, so you are one of those statistics in a way.
I am. I suffer from respiratory challenges, having grown up near McGrath-O'Brien Highway, literally 50 yards away. And like many families around the expanding I-93 or Route 28, where you have several environmental justice zones, we suffer for generations the health consequences of those bad policy decisions. And as a community, as a region, we've been stymied economically because we've had all this man-made infrastructure. We've had 3 commuter rail lines, one which goes right through this district, come through our community, none of them stop. So like much of the inner core around the Boston region, we've been leapfrogged, and we missed out on every economic opportunity. So hasn't the Commonwealth, because today we see what that potential is. When you look at Assembly Square, we built that T-station, the rail line was going through here. We should be using this approach to investing in infrastructure, 21st century infrastructure that makes us competitive globally in the 21st century economy. So yeah, as a community, we suffered the quality of life and health and social consequences of infrastructure that penetrated our community but didn't help any of us. Transit that was taken away from us. And I know that the Commonwealth understands those lessons as well, and I think that's why Governor Baker supports moving forward. We want to be smart about how we're going to do it, but we're going to do it working together, and it's going to happen.
Speaking of the Green Line extension and getting emissions out of the air, did get a chance to celebrate recently the ribbon cutting on the community path extension from Cedar Street to Lowell Street, which where it would meet up with the Green Line extension station that would be at Lowell Street, and which they plan to, as part of the project, to extend the community path all the way to the border with Boston. Can you tell me about the importance of just that segment alone and the community path in general in terms of reducing emissions and making the city more bikeable and walkable?
Well, we know that the higher your bike and walk score, the more bikeable and walkable your community is. All the statistics and studies show the no greater impact, positive impact on your local economy. And we're living in an era now of the greatest wave of urbanization in our nation's history. And in the world, by 2050, around the world, 3/4 of the world's population will live in city regions like the Boston region. So the regions and communities that can envision and plan for that future, understand the future of mobility, how we move as human beings, and the need to get away from relying on the automobile. And Somerville has this value. Our goal is to shift all new vehicle trips by 50% to more biking, walking, and public transportation, because we understand the positive impacts on our health if we can move more and be active and be connected to our parks, open spaces, and food sources. We know the impact on our environment if we can relieve the congestions of more automobiles and particulates in the air in our community. We've suffered those consequences for generations here, and we know the impact on our economy. Somerville should serve as a model for the rest of the country, and how smart visioning, planning, community empowerment, and investments for the long term on these values can align together to create an exceptional place to live, to work, to play, to raise a family, for industry to locate, to develop a sustainable economy. And those are lessons we want to talk about with everyone around the country and around the world.
Jeff Jacoby, conservative columnist in the Boston Globe today, I think had a little bit of a troll piece, but maybe serious. He was making the argument that Boston roads and roads in the greater Boston area, they just simply cannot accommodate both vehicles and bicycle traffic. They're too small, they're too narrow.
Jeff must have got a flat tire when he was a kid on his bike.
I'm assuming you disagree.
Right, absolutely. Look, we talked about the greatest demographic shift in our nation's history. What makes cities great, it's not the hard infrastructure, it's people. And if you're going to plan and design cities for cars and cars only, that's what you're going to get. If we want to design our communities to a human scale for people to live, to thrive, to play, to raise their families, to be part of a community in a healthy, productive way, which is absolutely aligned with building a strong, local, sustainable economy, that's what we need to do. This is where Jeff misses the boat, or the bike.
How do you make that safe? How do you build that kind of, community path extension, you're creating what's basically, for bicyclists, can be a highway
Right.
of sorts all the way in, and obviously accommodates pedestrians as well. But what about sharing the roads? How do you make these roads safe, and how do you educate both drivers and bicyclists alike about the rules of the road, watching out for one another?
Well, we got to make investments in the infrastructure, and a lot of the investments we've made to make Somerville the #1 biking community in the Northeast and one of the most walkable in the country as well, haven't been very expensive. You know, it's how we paint our roads, how we educate people, how we control the flow of traffic and automobiles. Education is a critical component of it. It's also part of a culture shift in our society. People want to bike and walk more. If we create the infrastructure, so like building the ball field and the Field of Dreams, they will come. They're here already, actually. The community path and building things like the cycle track on Beacon Street give a protected corridor and lane for bicyclists and pedestrians alike to not have to be in certain main roadways. But we have to share our roads. We have to be able to calm traffic, not stop it, in a way that doesn't queue up congestion, but allows for a multimodal use of our corridors for bicyclists, for walkers, for motor vehicles, and that creates a healthier community, and actually helps our local economies.
I wanted to touch on one other subject. We've been speaking a lot today about development, transitory development, and part of that is economic justice, environmental justice, a different kind of justice that has come up in the news a lot lately, in that the city took a step on under your direction, was hanging up a Black Lives Matter banner from City Hall. Obviously a very sensitive subject, inflames a lot of passion and reaction on people on all sides of an issue. Can you talk a little bit about your decision to put that banner up and why you did it?
We put that banner up not just to hang it, to make a statement, but really to ask a question of ourselves. You know, what is our role? What do we do? What do I do? And what is my role? And ours as a community, important and national conversation around race, let's be clear. And this is important for a nation with a long, deep-rooted history around racism, going back to slavery and today's version of Jim Crow, which is mass incarceration. I was asked today this question, but what does that mean? And the common default people have, don't all lives matter? Well, yeah, sure, that's true. But by saying Black Lives Matter, we're saying, well, Black Lives Matter too, and it's important. And in a time with that deep history regarding race in our nation, in a time where a disproportionate amount of black people are either shot, killed by those charged with protecting our society, those law enforcement charged with protecting us as human beings, or prosecuted, or over-prosecuted, or incarcerated, even longer jail sentences, or investigated, that begs the question, well, do all lives really matter? How can we make that statement if really the evidence saying that black lives are suffering more than anyone, disproportionately more than anyone else? And this is part of being a just, humane, compassionate society. And I have a responsibility as the Chief Executive Officer elected by the people of Somerville to lead a conversation in the community, to facilitate a conversation and self-examination of whether structural racism exists in our public institutions or our private institutions. And my hope is that Somerville will be just like we are on many other issues, on development, on education, on community empowerment, on public health, you know, be a model for the rest of the country and be part of an important conversation.
What are the next steps? Obviously you hung the banner, that's a big statement unto itself, a symbolic statement, but where does the city go from here now that the banner has been hung?
We want to commence a community-wide conversation. We had a great model here in the city for years called the Somerville Conversations, and started about 20 years ago. And where members around the community of all diverse backgrounds met in different focus groups, shared stories and narrative, their experiences from the perspective of their race or ethnicity or their gender here in the community. And it was really an opportunity to empower community, to learn, to strengthen the community, understand the power of our multicultural and diversity and diverse backgrounds. We think that's a good framework to begin a conversation around race, people's perspective on that based on their own personal experience and that context. We're also been working with leaders from Black Lives Matter who referred us to training, which I believe would be helpful, anti-racial training in our city agencies, and we'll start in the police department. So we're just getting started on a path which involves engagement, conversation, and empowerment. And again, a very humbling self-examination. It's not And I know people, this may make us feel uncomfortable, but we should, hate injustice more than we hate discomfort. It's okay to be uncomfortable. It's okay if we feel humbled by this conversation, but it's important that we look at ourselves in the mirror and ask, what is our role? And how can we say all lives matter when, if you're a Black American, you question whether your life really matters. And that's why we hung Black Lives Matter up.
Great. I think that's all the time we have for today, so thanks again for joining us here on the Mayor's Report. Mayor, thank you as always for joining us.
Appreciate it.